The 23rd Pioneers Conference has just been held in San Rafael in California, and it's October in 2012. And with me here is Tom Goldtoth, who has been chairing some of the sessions that have been about the indigenous people and their role in our efforts to approach sustainability. So Tom, would you please tell us something about your heritage and the way you're into the work of sustainability?
Yes, and thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to the audience of the people of Sweden. And if this message can go to people throughout Europe, it's very important, because I've been asked by my elders, including our spiritual leaders and our youth. Our youth are very concerned about the direction that the world is going. The youth are telling me that they're very concerned on what their children will inherit. I'm the spokesperson and executive director of a big international indigenous network that was formed in 1990. And it was formed as a response to unsustainable Western form of development. Here in North America, United States and Canada, including Alaska, that we found that the waste industry were coming to our lands, bribing our tribal leaders with money, saying that with our philosophy of one with the earth and with their technology that we can work together, both to make money and supposedly to dump toxic waste on our land. And it also included a major proposal by the United States government to dump radioactive nuclear waste in our lands as well. So here in the United States, we have a long history with the United States government from the 1700s to the 1800s of defense warfare to defend our lands. It was in the late 1800s that a lot of our people negotiated treaties to reserve what is already ours. As some of the listeners may know, majority of these treaties have been broken by the United States. And sometimes we use the terminology that we live in occupied land. So putting all this together, our history, to where we are here now at this Pioneers Conference with an intention and with clarity and a purpose and a goal to educate the world about what is going on, that if we don't start changing the way that we live, and we, when I say we, I mean all people, the two-leggeds, that if we continue to make decisions that are degrading the environment, we make decisions that are based upon an industrialized mindset that doesn't value the sacredness of Mother Earth, that we will continue to live a cycle of destruction. So part of our indigenous environmental network is to work with indigenous communities on that front line of resistance, fence line communities along unsustainable developments, like in the tar sands of Alberta, Canada, where we have the Dene, the Cree, and the Métis that are directly affected by contamination and the open pit mining, the deforestation, and one of the main causes in Canada of climate change and the failure of Canada to fulfill its commitments under the Kyoto Protocol is the tar sands, very carbon intense. So we've been going to Europe on shareholder campaigns. Norway, for an example. Statoil is operating in the tar sands. The Royal Bank, we're going to them because they're making investments in the tar sands. So these issues are escalating all over the world. So our purpose in our Indigenous Environmental Network is to work with our communities on that front line with advocacy, with organizing, with shareholder campaigns, but at the same time, we're confronting a problem that we cannot solve ourselves, is that we're dealing with the system. It's not just the United States, it's a global system that is out of balance with Mother Earth. So we made a plan that we will look around to see who the allies are to help institute a campaign for systems change, not climate change. We started to network with people in Copenhagen a couple years ago at the climate negotiations. There was a formation of a European base, and there were people from Sweden in this movement of Climate Justice Alliance to look at the false solutions that were being created to address climate change. And within that framework was the need to change a system that cannot be fixed. And I'm looking at economics. Capitalism is one of the root causes of climate change. Capitalism and our economic system takes too much from Mother Earth in the name of growth. It's taken too much fish out of the ocean. It's ripping out too many trees. It's gorging into Mother Earth to siphon out oil.
And now there are some initiatives that sort of pretend, as you and I are seeing it, to be greening the economy.
Yes.
But you don't really believe in that. The
No.
Red Plus and other stuff.
No, we don't, because we started to see the contradictions of a lot of the international environmental organizations. We call them NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and a lot of them are partnering up with multinational corporations around a market-based solutions. It's either market-based solutions or technology that are being lifted up as the saviors for the dilemma we're in. That's not to say that as indigenous peoples that we don't welcome creativity of our intellect. But some of the technologies out there really have no sound basis for safety protocols, for an example. The whole experimentation around the introduction of genetically engineered organisms, genetically engineered trees, for an example. We have food out there that we don't know where that food comes from. Some of this food don't even have seeds. You know, when we talk about understanding creation as indigenous peoples, we understand the importance of the sacredness of our Mother Earth and Father Sky. It's part of creation. But we have food that cannot create. It dies once we eat it. It has no energy. So we're dealing with an issue of false solutions in climate change, for an example, is using the market. Terminology like emissions trading, carbon offsets. So what this entails is a system to where the polluter actually continues to pollute, and they can buy themselves, just like the old church were indulgences, to where you can buy yourself out of your sin. Okay? So now a polluter in this mechanism in the north, for an example, can continue to expand, okay, the mining and the processing and the combustion of CO2, carbon dioxide, can continue the release of greenhouse gases. And the cover that allows them to do this is a market system where they can buy carbon credits, pieces of paper, by investing in the conservation of trees in the global south, where credits are cheaper. Now, we are for saving trees, definitely. We have to conserve trees. There's a lot of illegal timbering going on in the global south in developing countries. But why don't the governments, why don't the world leaders and the World Bank and the profiteers, why don't they go after the illegal loggers? Why don't they go after the drivers that are ripping those trees out? But they're using a mechanism to where the polluters can look good on paper by offsetting the pollution that they're putting up in the north. And the northern countries are part of this scam. Okay? And they say, well, I've offset my pollution by investing in the conservation of trees. But it gets more serious than that, because as indigenous peoples, we recognize that in a lot of these forested areas in the global south and developing countries are indigenous peoples who have been fighting for land tenureship. They've been fighting for access to their own biodiversity. In some areas, the governments don't even recognize indigenous peoples. There are also non-indigenous peoples who are dependent on the forests. And they are also fighting for livelihoods as well. So in these carbon market regimes, we question whether or not the rights of the local forest-dependent communities would be recognized, because part of this privatization scheme involves property rights. Before you can trade anything in a market system, you have to determine whose property that is. So these trees become a property right. So if you have big corporation, multinational petroleum company like Shell, ExxonMobil, ConocoPhillips, Total, Statoil, what they're doing is buying these trees. At the end of the day, that's their trees. So we're concerned already. There are already red type of projects where this is already happening. Carbon Cowboys.
REDD plus.
REDD, red. Reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, red. It's a mechanism that came out of the Kyoto Protocol, which established carbon trading. In recent years, it's been extended to look at forests as carbon stocks. Again, we support commitments to prevent illegal logging. The rainforest needs to be protected. But when we start using the market system for protectionism, you're going to have land grabs, you're going to have human rights violations, and probably violence. Already in the volunteer red type of projects that are out there, there's already forced removal of populations of people living in these forested areas. It's no longer their forest. So there are people who are for red because it's $1 trillion market. So there's been promises that have been made by these what we call carbon profiteers, carbon brokers, carbon cowboys, going into these remote villages where poverty already exists and promising money, benefit sharing in these schemes. And of course, some people said, this looks promising, we're not getting anything now. And but they don't have all the information. So we're trying to develop a campaign that takes funding to develop the popular education, especially visual presentation that is in their own language, to train people from these communities to fully understand this complex system called carbon trading, carbon offset. There's even very few NGOs that fully understand this system.
Exactly.
There's been a process of locking out civil society. And so we were here in Pioneers Conference and bringing a delegation of forest-dependent communities, indigenous peoples from Chiapas region of Mexico, from Ecuador, and from the state of Acre, Brazil. These are indigenous peoples and people who work with indigenous people who already see this problem mounting. In California, by the way, as a state of the United States, has a climate legislation, a bill that includes international offsets, RED. So they're already reaching out to these communities in Acre, Brazil, and in the Chiapas region of Mexico, developing a RED project. And in fact, we've been told when we came here to California that this will become the model for strengthening the implementation of RED globally. It will become the model. So that's why we need to get this information out, because the bigger issue here is that we have to wake up the world, because the world is out of balance in its relationship with the sacredness of Mother Earth. As indigenous peoples, we're saying, how can you put a price to water? How can you put a price to the land and the soil? How can you even put a price to fire? Fire is sacred. How can you put a price to air? Of course, a lot of people saw the contradictions years ago with the World Trade Organization, the WTO. It's all about economic globalization, financialization. And this climate negotiations is nothing but the WTO of air. At the recent World Summit, the Earth Summit, 20 years after 1992, it was held in Rio de Janeiro just this past June, Rio plus 20. The main agenda of the World Bank, in fact, European Union, United States, the industrialized countries, and corporations was pushing green economy. And couched within the green economy was privatization of nature. RED was one of the pillars of implementing this new movement of the profiteers of capitalism by putting a price to nature. So eventually we will see society be able to offset and be a mechanism for mitigating damage. So we will see someone being able to resolve themselves of the ecological sins by just putting up money. Where are we going with that kind of thinking? Where is the heart of the people of the land, the people of Sweden? We depend on them like that to see through these veils and disguises that want to cloud our people. We got to come back in a way that we truly understand who we are as children of Mother Earth. And that's the only way we can change this, and not depend on technology. Some technology is good. Not depend on the market, even though we do need an economic system for survival, but a system that is loving of Mother Nature, that is loving of community, loving of self, loving to nature, animals, birds. That's why we've been part of this bigger movement to implement policies from the community level all the way up to global policies that recognizes the rights of Mother Earth, the rights of nature. And there's a river in New Zealand that was just recognized that that river has rights from being contaminated. So that's what we're also saying, is the question of responsibilities of humanity to protect the sacredness of Mother Earth.
And in the last panel of the conference and of the indigenous set of panels, almost all the participants raised the issue, directly or indirectly, the issue of the difference between subject and object. And I think this is crucial, because as long as we deal with Mother Earth and nature, and in fact of our own lives, in objective terms, everything is tradable. My left arm, my right arm, my children and my mother will have a price tag. And if we don't see what we're doing with that kind of thinking, and most of all that kind of feeling, we probably won't have no chance. So that I'm very grateful that it has been the indigenous people in this conference that have that kind of awareness and knows how to treat this dimension of life. So I'm so grateful that you are holding this space, and I think we're totally dependent on what you are bringing.
Yes, and one of the things that I talk about is that it's time for humanity, it's time for the people of the world to take responsibility, to become part of Mother Earth, to become part of nature, because we are part of that. We are not separate.
No.
If we study the whole processes of industrialization, and part of the process of industrialization is the process of how we think. What has happened is that industrialization throughout the world has removed people from nature, so that we become dependent on technologies that may not necessarily mean the best for the future of our planet and our families. It involves a process of becoming dependent on corporations, so that the corporations have more power than we do. What happens if we become disempowered? So that's why we are saying that we are part of the planet, we are part of Mother Earth, we are her children, we are not separate from that, even though we are products of a whole vast education system that has removed us from that, to where we feel we are separate, but we are not.
No.
So the power is to understand and be part of the power and the force of the earth. And that's how we as a society can become strong and at peace with ourselves, knowing that we're giving something back to our future generation.
So clear thinking is actually a process of profound feeling. Without the feeling, you cannot think logically in a total sense.
Yes.
And I've understood also that there is like uncomfort, or you feel unsafe about saying too much about your traditions and your insights of a deeper reality, because when you do that, it has been kind of used against you. And still, I would imagine that you have so much to contribute with. Is there something that can be done in order for more of your wisdom to be known?
Well, the time is now. The time is now for us to start sharing our beliefs. But it's deeper than a belief. It's deeper than a philosophy. It's a way of life that also is part of action. And yes, we're always concerned on how much do we share, because there is the mentality and mindset out there of takers, they always take away from the earth, they take away from friendship, they take away from indigenous peoples, and they all become owners of that knowledge. And sometimes they manipulate the information we give to just serve their own needs. So there has to be an evolution of people, how they're growing in their realization of their relationship and their reality with Mother Earth, with creation. So we're taking that into consideration.
There's
I
a maturity process to be
to evolve
very much in the northern hemisphere in order to really totally embody or receive in a respectful way what you have to offer.
Yes. So I appreciate this time to talk with you and the people of Sweden, and there are some indigenous peoples who have traveled to your beautiful land, and
and we have indigenous people in the north.
Yes,
still.
yes. So our indigenous people in our environmental network, we're willing to go to your country and talk about these things, because we need to do this together with people of the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom.